Now listen, this is something we need to talk about carefully, not flippantly, not as a slogan, but as a serious psychological and sociological phenomenon. The idea that men ignore women because they like them, that sounds paradoxical, sounds absurd even, but it's not. It's ancient, it's deeply wired, and it's more relevant than ever. Let me explain. From a very early age, boys are socialized to pursue competence, to master skills, to compete, and to win. But they're not particularly taught how to express emotion, especially not the vulnerable kind, especially not when it comes to women. Because when a man shows he's interested, truly interested, he's handing over his cards. He's exposing his emotional underbelly. And that's terrifying. This is not some grand conspiracy. It's not malicious, it's protective. Men are terrified of rejection. Why? Because evolutionary psychology tells us that rejection, especially by a high-value mate, historically meant genetic dead end. You weren't good enough. And if you weren't good enough, well, that had real consequences for thousands of years. So what do they do instead? They distance themselves, they act aloof, they tease, they ignore. Now, this isn't always conscious. In fact, most men don't realize they're doing it. It's instinctual. It's an avoidance strategy wrapped in pride, fear, and a hint of confusion. It's also a power play, because when you withhold attention, you retain control. And many men, especially young men, are absolutely terrified of losing control in the presence of a woman they find compelling. From the moment a boy steps into the world, he is thrust into a silent curriculum of behavior, one that teaches him that strength is not spoken, that affection is concealed, and that emotional restraint is the cost of masculine respect. He is rarely told directly that to feel is weak, but he watches the way softness is mocked, how tears become ammunition, and how vulnerability, once exposed, is punished with isolation. Admiration in this world becomes dangerous, especially when directed toward the opposite sex, because it risks exposing something raw, something real, something unguarded. He learns that power lies not in openness, but in distance, in the careful management of his emotional display, in the illusion of indifference. When a young man feels drawn to a woman, truly drawn, it awakens something primal and chaotic within him, and without a structure to understand that fire, he extinguishes it through silence. He doesn't ignore her because she's unimportant. He ignores her because she matters too much, and he has no psychological tools to handle the magnitude of that importance. The biology of attraction doesn't consult his maturity. It floods him with chemicals that confuse pride with affection, fear with desire, and silence with strategy. He mimics what he's seen from men before him, fathers who were stoic, brothers who teased, peers who masked longing with sarcasm and emotional withdrawal. It's not that he's uninterested, it's that he's terrified of what interest demands from him. Humility, risk, surrender, and perhaps rejection. And in his world, rejection isn't just disappointment. It's a threat to identity, a challenge to his status, a shattering of the image he's trying desperately to maintain. So instead of reaching out, he pulls away, not because he doesn't care, but because caring too much has never been safe territory for him. To compliment her beauty might reveal how captivated he really is, and in doing so, he'd lose the fragile upper hand he believes he must maintain at all costs. He stares, but won't speak, notices everything, but acts like he sees nothing, and punishes himself later for every word he never said. This isn't apathy, it's paralysis, a psychological freezing in the presence of something or someone that touches too close to the truth he's been taught to bury. Culture praises him when he's composed, calculated, and controlled, but love, by its nature, demands the opposite: openness, spontaneity, surrender. So the man who likes a woman the most might be the very one who says the least, simply because the stakes are higher than anyone realizes. It's not manipulation, it's malfunction, a distortion of masculine instinct born from centuries of emotional suppression. Men compete, They don't confess, they posture, they don't plead, and in the arena of attraction, these instincts turn into silent wars of avoidance. He convinces himself that ignoring her gives him control, that detachment is strength, and that withholding attention protects both his ego and his autonomy. But what it actually creates is distance, misunderstanding, and a profound sense of misalignment between intention and behavior. He may talk endlessly about women he doesn't care for, yet go mute in front of the one who truly stirs his soul. He might laugh too loud at someone else's joke, just to avoid looking at the girl who made his heartbeat shift. And society, in its confusion, interprets this avoidance as immaturity, rudeness, or narcissism, rarely seeing it for what it truly is, reverence that has lost its voice. Because what he feels isn't shallow, it's overwhelming, and in the absence of emotional literacy, overwhelm leads to escape. He would rather pretend she doesn't exist than risk saying something wrong and losing everything he imagines could be possible. He might even criticize her subtly, mock her ideas, or diminish her presence, not because he believes she's lesser, but because he fears she's far more than he deserves. His silence is not always rejection. It's often a desperate attempt at preservation of self, of image, of safety. And tragically, the woman on the other end interprets that silence as a verdict, not knowing it was in fact a plea. Because he has not been taught how to approach without aggression, how to admire without objectifying, or how to express without unraveling. The gap between what he feels and what he expresses grows wider with every glance, every swallowed compliment, every moment he turns away when he wants to lean in. This isn't about arrogance. It's about fear cloaked in dignity, desire masked in stoicism, and longing wrapped in restraint. And the cost is immense because in ignoring her, he also denies himself the very connection he's craving but cannot claim. She might leave thinking she was invisible while he stays behind, haunted by all the words he could not speak. This dynamic doesn't serve anyone. It fractures the bridge between masculine instinct and authentic connection. And unless we educate men about the internal war between admiration and self-protection, we leave them stranded in their own emotional architecture. We must stop confusing silence with strength, avoidance with wisdom, and detachment with maturity. Because a man who ignores a woman he likes is not strong. He's lost in the ancient conflict between vulnerability and survival. He's obeying the ghosts of his upbringing, of his biology, of a world that told him, never let them see you want. But wanting is human, expressing it is heroic, and the man who learns to speak his admiration with integrity becomes something rare, a man of courage and clarity. Until then, we will keep watching brilliant women walk away, convinced they were unseen, when in truth, they were the very center of his storm. And that storm, unless given language, will keep destroying the bridges it longs to cross. When a man looks at a woman and feels something stir inside him, something real, something electric, he is immediately pulled into a power struggle that exists entirely within his own mind. He knows that attention is currency, and whoever gives it first risks becoming emotionally indebted. He has been taught, not with lectures but with experiences, that showing too much interest is a gamble, because the more you reveal, the more someone can hurt you. The moment he makes his attraction visible, he lowers his guard. And for many men, that vulnerability is a foreign and terrifying landscape. Men fear powerlessness more than they fear rejection, because rejection is a moment, but powerlessness is an identity. And to show a woman that she affects him, that she disrupts his calm, that she has the ability to change his emotional state, is to place himself at her mercy. This is not about games. It's about survival, emotional and psychological, in a world that does not reward unguarded expression. He may admire her intelligence, be captivated by her voice, even find himself imagining a future with her, but he will not say it, because saying it would shift the power dynamic. He would rather keep control than risk connection, because connection to him feels like exposure. He withholds not because he is cruel, but because he's been conditioned to believe that attention is submission. He calculates every interaction like a chess move, convinced that revealing desire means forfeiting respect. He has watched his peers lose themselves in pursuit, become invisible after confession, and be ridiculed for needing someone too deeply. So he adapts by becoming emotionally economical, investing just enough to stay present, but never enough to be vulnerable. He knows the world does not show mercy to men who feel too much, especially not in public, especially not toward women who may not reciprocate. He equates detachment with dignity, not realizing that true dignity is the ability to stand, fully seen, fully known, and fully unashamed. He isn't cold, he's cautious. He isn't indifferent, he's strategic, and behind every ounce of restraint lies a deep well of restrained emotion. He may speak to her through indirect signals, cryptic humor, or half glances, hoping she reads between lines he's too afraid to write clearly. Because if she knows what he feels, she holds the pen, and to him that means she can rewrite the story in a way that leaves him erased. He may convince himself that holding back is noble, that stoicism is romantic, that distance is attractive, but these are masks worn to protect something raw inside. He has been shaped by a culture where male emotion is often weaponized against him, where romantic vulnerability is interpreted as weakness or desperation. He fears becoming the man who texts first, who praises openly, who loses mystery, because he's been told that such men are discarded, not desired. So he watches, waits, analyzes, measuring every word she says for clues, trying to determine if it's safe to express what's burning inside his chest. He might even act like he doesn't care, not because he truly doesn't, but because caring too loudly has consequences he's seen play out in brutal ways. To care is to be exposed. To be exposed is to be evaluated. And to be evaluated is to risk being found wanting. And in a world where male worth is often tied to performance, being found wanting is equivalent to being unworthy of love. So he maintains the illusion of indifference, not to deceive her, but to protect the last pieces of self-worth he hasn't placed in someone else's hands. He is not playing with her feelings, he is avoiding being played with his own. He is not arrogant. He is afraid that if he reaches, she will recoil and he will crumble. This fear does not come from nothing. It is learned through rejection, ridicule, and the weight of silent expectations he has carried since boyhood. He wants to be desired but not dominated. He wants to be chosen but not exposed. He wants love but fears surrender. He knows that if she sees him flustered, if she sees the spark in his eye, if she hears the tremor in his voice, then she will know she matters. And that terrifies him. Because if she matters, she has power. And if she has power, she could walk away with parts of him he hasn't given to anyone else. He thinks ignoring her keeps him safe, but it really just keeps him alone. He thinks stoicism makes him stronger, but it just makes him harder to reach. He thinks emotional neutrality makes him desirable, but it only makes him unknowable. He is stuck between admiration and self-defense, caught in a loop where wanting her collides with fearing her judgment. And that fear is not small, it is existential, because to be dismissed by someone you admire is to question your very adequacy. He may fantasize about what he would say, what gesture he would make, what truth he would speak, but reality always pulls him back into silence. Not because he has nothing to say, but because saying it would unravel everything he's built to protect himself. His pride tells him to wait for her to notice, to speak, to move, but his heart begs for permission to leap. And in that tension, he becomes quiet, distant, unreadable, not because he lacks feeling, but because he has too much. She may think he sees her as ordinary, when in fact he has placed her so high on a pedestal that he dare not disturb the image. She may believe he is uninterested, when the truth is he cannot breathe properly in her presence. She may interpret his coldness as cruelty when it's actually reverence turned inward. But he cannot explain this, not without dismantling years of armor, not without risking the kind of emotional exposure he has never practiced. Because no one ever taught him that vulnerability can be strength, that attention can be a gift, that affection does not always end in defeat. No one told him that power is not lost when you say, I see you and I'm moved, but is found in the courage to speak truth without certainty of return. So he says nothing, not because he doesn't feel, but because he feels so much that saying even one word might open a flood he cannot control. And control to him is everything, because without it he fears he will be consumed. So he chooses silence, not as a statement to her, but as a compromise with himself, to keep what's sacred from being shattered. But in doing so, he misses what could have been extraordinary, all for the illusion of safety. And so we arrive at the heart of the matter, a truth that is as uncomfortable as it is essential, that the distance between men and women is not made of apathy, but of fear, not of ignorance, but of instinct poorly understood. We do not ignore what we dislike, we ignore what overwhelms us, what disorients us, what has the power to undo the fragile structure we've spent years constructing in silence. A man doesn't walk away from a woman he admires because he feels nothing. He walks away because he feels too much, and no one ever gave him permission to feel. He stays silent not because his heart is closed, but because it's wide open. And unguarded hearts, in his world, are the first to bleed. We have mistaken this behavior for cruelty, for coldness, for manipulation. But underneath it lies a desperate hope that someone might finally see past the performance and ask, not why didn't you speak, but what made you afraid to? And that question, if asked honestly, could begin to unravel centuries of emotional misunderstanding between the masculine and the feminine. Because men do not need to be shamed into sensitivity. They need to be taught that strength does not evaporate in the presence of feeling. It expands. It expands. And women, in turn, deserve more than silence, more than confusion. They deserve clarity, honesty, and the kind of admiration that speaks not just in glances or guarded signals, but in language that dares to be real. We must teach boys that the highest form of courage is not domination, but emotional truth. We must teach girls not to take quiet rejection personally, but to recognize the quiet war many boys are fighting within themselves. Because when we finally understand that attention is power and that silence is often fear in disguise, we can stop misinterpreting one another and start healing the gap between love and expression. This is not just psychology. This is not just sociology. This is human, and it is urgent. Because the next generation is watching, and if we don't teach them how to feel honestly, they will continue to love silently. And silence, no matter how loud the heart, is a lonely way to live. Let them speak. Let them be seen. Let them be brave. And let that bravery begin with us, here, now, and without shame.